Hi, my name is Aaliyah, and in today's video I want to go over Apple's earning call, which came out today, and today is January 29th, 2019. Apple just reported earnings after they just revised guidance downward. So if you remember a couple of weeks ago, Apple CEO Tim Cook of Apple came out with a statement saying, yeah, we guided for like 89, $90 billion, but you know what? We're actually gonna come in around $84 billion, which is a huge miss from what they originally guided for. And so they guided for revenue $84 million, and let's look at what how they actually did this quarter. And so, and I was looking at this, and it's just like I feel like the stock jumped up a little bit in after hours trading, but I feel like this earnings was so disappointing, and like you kind of have to assess, do I want to stay invested in this company? Like, because Apple is facing a couple of headwinds right now that I want to talk about. But first, what happened? Like what happened during the quarter? And so what were their financial metrics? And so EPS, earnings per share. Uh, EPS was $4.17 forecasted by analysts. Apple came in at $4.18 per share. That's actual. So EPS, they beat by zero point zero 0.01 cents. Um, so EPS, they beat revenue. Revenue 83.9 was forecasted. Apple came in at $84 billion. Just actually a crazy number. $84 billion. Like, never mind $1 billion. Can you imagine $1 billion? But Apple made sales of $84 billion. Alright, so that's 84.3 billion dollars, and that is actual. And so they beat on EPS, they beat on revenue. But you have to remember they guided down from their earlier estimates of like $90 billion, and so that's a huge miss in return to that. But they did beat on their second revision for about $84 billion. Quarter one iPhone revenue was about $51.98 billion versus $52.67 billion forecasted. Services, they beat 10.9 billion versus 10.87 billion forecasted. And their projected quarter two revenue was $55 billion, was between $55 billion and $59 billion versus $58 billion forecasted. And so their guidance also was something that was a little bit disappointing. Like, yeah, it fell in the forecast because it was 55. Let's actually write that down. So it was 55 to 59. What was forecasted was 58. So that was forecast. And that is guidance. And so, yeah, like, the forecast fell in their guidance estimate, but look at the lower end, $55 billion. I feel like for Apple that is not good. And going more into like their how they did in the segment, I thought it was, that they beat, so the stock is up, but I thought it was honestly like a little bit disappointing. They did say that in greater mainland China iPhone sales would decrease, and so their $84 billion in sales was a decline 5% year over year. So they had a 5% year over year decline in revenue, making the first annual revenue decline during a holiday season quarter since 2001. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Year over year revenue decline is not something that you want to see. Apple has said that 100% of the revenue decline is attributable to the performance in China, where the company saw almost $5 billion less in revenue than the year ago period. So for gross margin, Apple reported gross margin for the iPhones 34.3%, which is kind of on the low side as far as like gross margins for what Apple has had in the past. And so I think the gross margins are contracting a little bit because people are holding on to their iPhones longer, and that they're not buying the newest models that are out today, which are the most expensive models. And I think Apple has hit a pricing point where there's limiting returns, and that people are, yeah, it's higher price, but people are buying less iPhones as a result, and they've kind of hit that peak right there. I think of peak of how much they can charge for the iPhones. And so what CEO Tim Cook said in the earnings call was our customers are holding on to their older iPhones a bit longer than in the past. When you pair this with the macroeconomic factors, particularly in emerging markets, it resulted in iPhone revenue that was down 15% from last year. And so if you remember last earnings call, Apple stopped reporting unit sales for their iPhone, and because we saw sales decline in the iPhone for unit sales actually sold, we saw a decline in that. So Apple said, we're not gonna like discuss those matters anymore. Like we're not gonna say that on the call or like give that out. So they don't report those numbers anymore. And as you can see here, the revenue from the iPhone was down 15% for the year, which is a little bit disappointing coming from Apple. And you have to think of like, there's different like bull and bear cases for Apple. Like the bull case is like, the services will take over. It's good. Like a lot of people say like the services are going to make up most of the revenue. $100 billion in services by whatever year they say. I forget the exact year. But by this year, and so I feel like there's a lot of hope on Apple to do well as far as like services, and maybe like get the pricing point right on the iPhone. So maybe they'll have more unit sales of like the iPhone sold at a lower price point, or to keep the high sales and have a lower amount of units sold, but so much that it's not a 15% decline in iPhone revenue. So to hit that perfect pricing point, and at this point, I don't think that's the perfect pricing point, because you see in China, like there are all these different Chinese companies that the people in China would rather buy than the high-end point Apple phone, which they said in Greater Mainland China that was their biggest problem in this emerging market. And think about like the slowing Chinese economy that's been reported. It's just like all things to consider, and like how can Apple get through these headwinds that they're facing now? And so I propose like either services, which is a higher margin segment anyway, so services, and then also maybe like the perfect pricing point for their iPhones. Maybe not to price it so high, because you saw 15% revenue decline for the iPhones. I just think that's a little bit disappointing. Something to think about as far as like putting your money into this company. But with the bull case, I will say that Apple has a lot of cash on hand to go into research and design to do this. They have a lot of research. They have a lot of cash on hand to do a lot. And so I feel like Apple as a company is in a good position compared to other companies, in that they have a fortress balance sheet. And so that was Apple's earnings that they reported today. We will see in the future how Apple does. As of right now, Apple remains my biggest position. And as of right now, they're facing a little bit of headwinds, but I do believe in the foundation and the fundamentals of this company. And so that's my opinion on Apple. What do you guys think about Apple? Leave a comment, and I'll probably respond, and like we'll get some discourse going or something. But yeah, what do you guys think about Apple and like what's happening now? Because Apple reported earnings. Everybody's looking at these earnings because this company like decides the whole market. Like it's one of the top on like all the index funds, so it's gonna move basically the whole market if it makes a big move. Right now, let me look it up. Right now, Apple is okay. Apple was down about 1% today. The market was kind of a sideways day. Apple was down 1%. They reported after the bell. They reported at 4:30 p.m. their numbers, and after hours trading, they're up 5%. 5.47%. So they're up, you know, decent amount. And so we'll see what they open at tomorrow. But this is a big company, so a lot of eyes on them in terms of like this could potentially move the market tomorrow and for the rest of the week. And then we also have big names reporting tomorrow too, so we'll see how they do. And I'll probably have some videos up about those companies. So stay tuned. Leave a comment about your opinion and what's going on in earnings season right now. And I will see you guys in the next video.